The ink stain on Victoria Garrett's thumb had been there for 3 days. A stubborn reminder that she could not seem to wash away no matter how hard she scrubbed at the well behind her father's general store in Chico, California. She sat beneath the sprawling oak tree on that scorching afternoon in July of 1878, her leather-bound journal balanced on her knees, pencil moving across the page in careful strokes, as she attempted to capture the way the heat made everything shimmer like water in the distance. The words never came out quite right, but she kept trying anyway, whispering them aloud to test how they sounded, unaware that anyone was listening until a deep voice said, "That is real pretty, miss." Victoria's head snapped up so fast her braid whipped across her shoulder. The man standing a few yards away was tall and sun-weathered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly between his fingers as if he had interrupted something sacred and was not quite sure how to proceed. The horse behind him, a sturdy bay gelding, stood patiently in the afternoon heat. "I did not mean to startle you," he said quickly, taking a half-step back. "I was just passing through and heard you speaking. Those words about the summer sky looking like spilled honey, that was something special." Her cheeks flushed hot and not from the California sun. "You should not have been listening. That was private. I apologize truly." He put his hat back on, tipping it slightly. "Name is Henry Yates. I am looking for the general store, got supplies to pick up before I head back to the ranch." Victoria closed her journal with a decisive snap, pressing it against her chest. "Around front. You cannot miss it." But Henry did not move. His gaze dropped to the journal she held so protectively. "You write a lot of poetry. That is none of your concern, Mr. Yates." "No, I suppose it is not." He shifted his weight, and she noticed the way his boots were worn at the heels, the way his shirt was faded but clean. A working man, then, not one of the fancy ranchers who hired others to do their labor. "But if you ever want someone to listen, I would be honored. I do not know much about poetry myself, but I know when something sounds true." Victoria felt something flutter in her chest, something she immediately tried to suppress. She had learned long ago that men in Chico were interested in pretty faces and domestic skills, not in the strange girl who spent her free time scribbling words that most people found foolish. Her own father had told her more than once that poetry would not help her catch a husband or run a household. "I should get back inside," she said, standing and brushing dust from her skirt. "My father will be wondering where I went." Henry nodded slowly, but before she could walk away, he said, "I work at the Running Creek Ranch about 5 miles north. I come into town every Saturday for supplies. If you are ever out here again under this tree, I would surely like to hear more of what you have written." She did not answer, just hurried around the side of the building, her heart beating faster than it should. When she glanced back from the corner, he was still standing there, watching the spot where she had been sitting, before he finally turned and led his horse toward the front of the store. The following Saturday, Victoria told herself she was not waiting for anyone as she settled beneath the oak tree with her journal. She had simply wanted fresh air and a quiet place to work on the new poem she had started, one about the way morning light touched the Sacramento Valley. The fact that it was Saturday, that Henry had said he came to town on Saturdays, was purely coincidental. She had been writing for perhaps 20 minutes when she heard the familiar sound of horse hooves on packed dirt. She did not look up, even though her pulse quickened. "Afternoon, Miss Garrett." So he had learned her name. She glanced up to find Henry approaching on foot, his horse tied at the post out front. He carried a small paper-wrapped parcel in one hand. "Mr. Yates, I was hoping you might be here." He held out the parcel. "Brought you something. Saw it at the Mercantile in Red Bluff last week and thought of you." Victoria hesitated before taking it. Inside the paper she found 3 new pencils, their tips sharpened to perfect points, and a small bottle of ink. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to." He settled onto the ground a respectful distance away, back against the tree trunk. "Would you read me what you are working on? You cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious. I have been thinking about that line all week, the one about honey, made me see the sky different." Victoria had never met anyone like him. Men in town either ignored her writing completely or made jokes about it. Her father tolerated it only because she helped in the store without complaint. But here was this cowboy, this stranger, asking to hear her words as if they mattered. "It is not finished," she warned. "That is all right." She took a breath and began to read, her voice soft at first, then growing stronger. The poem was about morning, about the way the world felt full of possibility before the heat settled in, before the day's disappointments could take hold. When she finished, silence stretched between them, and she immediately regretted sharing something so personal. "That is beautiful," Henry said finally, and his voice was rough with sincerity. "The way you said the light touches everything like a promise. That is exactly how it feels, even if I never had words for it before." "You really think so?" "I know so." He picked up a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. "How did you learn to write like that?" "I taught myself, mostly. I read whatever books I can get my hands on. Whitman, Dickinson, some of the old English poets. Then I just started trying to put my own thoughts down." She ran her fingers over the journal's worn cover. "My mother used to say I saw the world differently than most people. She passed when I was 14. I think the writing helps me make sense of things." "I am sorry about your mother." "Thank you." She studied him more carefully now, noting the calluses on his hands, the way he held himself with a quiet confidence. "What do you do at the ranch?" "Whatever needs doing. Cattle mostly, some horses. I have been saving to buy my own place someday. Got my eye on some land near Deer Creek." He looked up at the sky, squinting against the brightness. "I want something that is mine, you know, something I built with my own hands." They talked until the shadows grew long, until Victoria's father called from inside the store that it was time to close up. Henry stood, dusting off his pants, and looked down at her with something warm in his expression. "Same time next week." Victoria knew she should say no. She knew that letting this continue was dangerous, that she was already thinking about him far too much. But she found herself nodding anyway. Same time. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that Victoria came to treasure. Every Saturday, Henry would arrive at the general store, conduct his business with her father, then find her beneath the oak tree. She would read him her poetry, sometimes whole pieces, sometimes fragments that she was still shaping. He listened to every word with an attention that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He told her about ranch life, about the satisfaction of hard work and open spaces. She learned that he had come west from Missouri after his parents died in a cholera outbreak, that he had been on his own since he was 16, that he was now 24 and determined to make something of himself. She told him about growing up in Chico, about her dreams of maybe publishing her poetry someday, though she hardly dared say it aloud. "Why not?" Henry asked one afternoon in late August. They sat closer together now, shoulders almost touching. "If you have something to say, people should hear it." "Women do not become poets, not really." "Emily Dickinson is a woman," Victoria laughed. "You know about Emily Dickinson, you mentioned her. So I asked around, found someone who had one of her poems in an old magazine, had them read it to me." He looked almost embarrassed. "I am not much for reading myself. Letters and such I can manage, but nothing fancy." Something in Victoria's chest cracked open at that admission, at the image of this strong, capable man hunting down poetry because she had mentioned it. Would you like me to teach you? To read better, I mean. You would do that, if you want. So they added reading lessons to their Saturday afternoons. Victoria brought books from her father's limited selection, and Henry worked through them with a determination that did not surprise her. He was quick and focused, and she realized his struggles had less to do with ability and more to do with lack of opportunity. No one had ever taken the time to teach him properly. As summer turned toward fall, Victoria found herself living for Saturdays. The rest of the week felt like marking time, going through motions. She helped her father in the store, managed their small household, attended church on Sundays, but her mind was always drifting to the oak tree, to Henry's voice asking her to read just one more poem, to the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "You are different lately," her father said one evening as they ate dinner. Ezra Garrett was a practical man, worn thin by years of hard work and the loss of his wife. "You have been smiling more." "Have I? That cowboy, Yates, he is the reason, is he not?" Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "We are friends, friends." Her father's expression was unreadable. "He has been coming around an awful lot. He is learning to read. I am helping him. And that is all." She met her father's eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to be careful. Cowboys do not make reliable husbands. They move around, follow work. You need someone stable." "Like who?" "The banker's son who cannot remember my name. The farmer who told me reading was a waste of time for women." She set her fork down. "Henry listens to me, Papa. He cares about what I think." "Henry, is it?" Her father sighed heavily. "Your mother would know what to say. I just do not want to see you hurt." But it was too late for that, Victoria realized. She was already in too deep, already imagining a future that might never exist. The first Saturday in October, Henry arrived with news. "Boss is sending a crew to Red Bluff for a week. We have to move some cattle to new pasture, then help a neighboring ranch with their roundup. I am going to miss next Saturday." Victoria tried to hide her disappointment. "That is all right. It is just 1 week. It feels like a long time." He reached out and took her hand, the first time he had touched her beyond accidental brushes. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" "These past months, getting to know you, listening to your poetry, just being near you, it has meant everything to me." He squeezed her fingers gently. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You see beauty everywhere, and you are not afraid to say what you think. And when you read your poems, it is like the whole world stops. Henry, I know I do not have much to offer yet. I am still saving for that land. But I am serious about my future, about making something of myself. And I would like you to be part of that future if you will have me." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You want to court me, properly? I want to marry you if you will say yes." "Not right away. I know we need time, and I need to talk to your father, but I needed you to know my intentions are honorable. You are not just some girl I am spending time with. You are the woman I want to build a life with." She threw her arms around his neck, and he caught her, holding tight. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, I want that too." When they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. Henry cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Can I kiss you, please?" His lips were gentle on hers, tender and searching. Victoria had been kissed exactly once before, by a boy at a church social who had tasted like tobacco and moved with clumsy urgency. This was nothing like that. This was soft and sweet and felt like coming home. When they broke apart, Henry pressed his forehead to hers. "I am going to talk to your father today before I leave for Red Bluff. I want to do this right." They walked to the front of the store together, hands linked. Victoria waited outside while Henry went in, her stomach a mass of nerves. She could hear the low rumble of male voices but could not make out words. The conversation seemed to last forever. When Henry finally emerged, his expression was serious. Her heart sank. "What did he say?" He said yes, but with conditions. Henry led her back to their tree. "He wants me to prove I can provide for you. He wants to see that I have stable income and prospects. He said we can court officially, but there will be no talk of marriage until I have saved enough to put a down payment on land or buy into a ranch partnership. That could take years. Or it could take months if I work hard enough." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I will do whatever it takes, Victoria. You are worth waiting for." The week Henry was gone felt endless. Victoria wrote more poetry than she had in months, all of it about longing and absence and the particular ache of missing someone. She kept the new poems in a separate section of her journal, planning to share them when he returned. But when Saturday came and she settled beneath the oak tree, Henry did not arrive at the usual time. An hour passed, then two. Victoria tried not to panic. Perhaps the work in Red Bluff had taken longer than expected. Perhaps there had been complications with the cattle. The sun was beginning to set when she finally saw him riding up, but something was wrong. He moved stiffly, and as he dismounted, she noticed the bandage around his left hand. "What happened?" She rushed to him. "Stupid accident. Bull got spooked, and I got my hand caught in some wire trying to control him." He tried to smile. "It is not as bad as it looks." But when Victoria gently took his wrist, examining what she could see of the injury, she felt sick. The bandage was clean at least, but the hand was clearly causing him pain. "You need to see a doctor." "Already did. He stitched me up, said I need to keep it wrapped and clean. Problem is, I cannot work like this. Boss said I can stay on doing light duties, but the pay is half what I was making." Victoria understood the implications immediately. Half pay meant saving for their future would take twice as long. It meant her father's conditions would be even harder to meet. "We will figure it out," she said firmly. "You need to heal properly. If you rush back to hard work, you could hurt yourself worse." They sat together as darkness fell, Victoria carefully reading her new poems by the last light. When she finished the final one, about how missing him felt like missing a part of herself, Henry pulled her close with his good arm. "Keep writing," he murmured into her hair. "Promise me you will keep writing no matter what happens." "I promise." The next weeks tested them both. Henry's hand healed slowly, too slowly for his liking. Victoria helped where she could, bringing him books to keep his mind occupied, reading to him when he grew frustrated with his reduced circumstances. She also started helping her father more in the store, taking on additional responsibilities in hopes of earning a small wage that she could set aside. One afternoon in early November, a well-dressed man came into the store asking for Victoria by name. Her father regarded him with suspicion until the man explained he was an editor for a literary magazine based in Sacramento. "I was given your name by the schoolteacher here in Chico," the man said, addressing Victoria. "She mentioned you write poetry. We are always looking for new voices, particularly regional perspectives on life in California. Would you be willing to submit some work for consideration?" Victoria could barely breathe. "You want to read my poetry, if you are willing to share it. We pay $3 per poem we publish, and the exposure could lead to other opportunities." $3 per poem. It was not a fortune, but it was something. More than that, it was recognition, validation that her words had value beyond her own private enjoyment. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would be honored." She spent the next week selecting her best work, copying it out in her neatest handwriting. Henry helped her choose, listening as she read through dozens of poems, offering his honest opinion about which ones felt most complete, most true. She submitted 10 poems, hoping that perhaps one or two might be accepted. 6 weeks later, in mid-December, she received a letter from the magazine. They wanted to publish 4 of her poems in their spring issue. Enclosed was a check for $12. Victoria stood in the middle of the store, staring at the check, tears streaming down her face. Her father, reading over her shoulder, pulled her into a rare embrace. "Your mother would be so proud," he said gruffly. "I am proud." She ran the whole way to Running Creek Ranch, not caring that it was improper for an unmarried woman to visit a man's workplace. Henry was in the barn, his hand finally free of bandages, working on repairing a saddle. When he saw her face, he dropped everything. "What happened? Are you all right? They are publishing my poems, 4 of them." She thrust the letter at him. "And they paid me, Henry. They paid me for my words." His whoop of joy echoed through the barn. He spun her around, both of them laughing, and when he set her down, he kissed her soundly. "I knew it. I knew the whole world needed to hear what you have to say." He held her face in his hands, his own eyes bright. "You are amazing, Victoria Garrett. We are both going to make it," she said. "Your hand is better. You will be back to full pay soon. I will keep writing and submitting. We will save together." "Together," he agreed. Winter in the Sacramento Valley was mild compared to other parts of the country, but it brought its own challenges. The ranch work slowed, which meant less income for Henry. Victoria continued writing, submitting to other magazines and newspapers. Some rejected her work, but others accepted it, and slowly her name began to appear in print. Their Saturday meetings continued, but now they often included other activities. Henry taught Victoria to ride properly, and she brought him more advanced books to read. They talked about their future home, about what kind of life they wanted to build. Henry wanted space for horses and cattle. Victoria wanted a room with good light for writing, and a large kitchen like her mother used to have. "How many children do you want?" Henry asked one Saturday in February as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky purple and gold. Victoria leaned against his shoulder. "At least 3. I hated being an only child. You, as many as you want to give me." He kissed the top of her head. "As long as they have your way with words and your kind heart, and your stubbornness and strong hands." "That is determination, not stubbornness," she laughed. "If you say so." By spring, things were looking brighter. Henry had been promoted to lead ranch hand, which came with better pay and a small cabin on the property. Victoria's poems were appearing regularly in 3 different publications, and she had been approached about compiling a collection into a small book. Her father, seeing how serious Henry was about providing for his daughter, had softened considerably. One Sunday after church, Ezra invited Henry to dinner. Over roast chicken and potatoes, he addressed the young man directly. "You have proven yourself, son. Held steady work, saved your money, treated my daughter with respect. If you still want to marry her, you have my blessing." Henry's face lit up. He looked at Victoria, who was already nodding, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I promise I will spend every day making sure she knows she made the right choice." They were married in June of 1879, a simple ceremony in the Chico church with the whole town in attendance. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried wildflowers that Henry had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Henry kissed her with such joy that several people in the congregation laughed. The reception was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food that neighbors had contributed. Victoria's poems had made her something of a local celebrity, and people were genuinely happy to celebrate the unusual couple, the poet and the cowboy. As the sun set, Henry pulled Victoria away from the party, leading her to a wagon decorated with ribbons. "I have a surprise for you." He drove them north, away from town, until they reached a property Victoria did not recognize. It was beautiful land, rolling hills with oak trees and a creek running through it. A small house stood on a rise, newly built from the looks of it. "Henry, where are we?" "Home." He helped her down from the wagon. "Remember that land near Deer Creek I told you about? I bought it 6 months ago. Used my savings and the extra money from my promotion. I have been building the house in my spare time, with help from some of the ranch hands. It is not fancy, but it is ours." Victoria walked toward the house as if in a dream. It was small but well constructed, with a wide porch and large windows. Inside, she found a main room with a fireplace, a bedroom, a kitchen, and in the back, a small additional room with a desk and chair positioned to catch the afternoon light. "Your writing room," Henry said from behind her. "Every poet needs a proper place to work." She turned to him, overwhelmed. "How did you manage all this?" "I told you I would do whatever it took." He pulled her close. "You believed in me, in my dreams. I wanted to prove I could make yours come true too." Their first year of marriage was everything Victoria had hoped for and more. Henry worked their land and hired himself out to neighboring ranches for extra income. Victoria wrote, her reputation growing with each publication. Her first book of poetry came out that fall, a slim volume titled Under the Oak, and though it did not make them rich, it sold enough copies to provide a steady trickle of income. They learned each other's rhythms, the way married couples do. Victoria discovered that Henry liked his coffee strong and his breakfast hearty, that he sang quietly to himself when he worked with the horses, that he always fell asleep holding her hand. Henry learned that Victoria needed quiet mornings for writing, that she stress-baked when a poem was giving her trouble, that she cried at beautiful sunsets. Every evening, after the work was done, they would sit on their porch and Victoria would read to him. Sometimes her own new work, sometimes the books they were working through together. Henry's reading had improved dramatically, and he could now make his way through most texts, but he still loved hearing her voice bringing the words to life. "Read me the one about the first time we met," he would often request, and Victoria would turn to that poem in her journal, the one she had written but never published because it was too personal, too precious to share with the world. In the spring of 1880, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She told Henry on a Saturday, keeping their tradition alive even though they lived together now. They had ridden out to check on the cattle, and as they sat by the creek eating lunch, she simply said, "I am going to need that cradle your grandfather made, the one you have stored in the barn." Henry stared at her for a long moment before understanding dawned. Then he was on his feet, pulling her up, spinning her around, but gently, so gently as if she were made of glass. "A baby. We are having a baby, in November, I think." He knelt down, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa cannot wait to meet you, and your mama is going to write you the most beautiful poems." Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him William, after Henry's father, and from the moment Victoria held him, she understood love in an entirely new way. Henry was a natural father, patient and tender with the infant. He would walk the floor with William when the baby fussed at night, singing the same quiet songs he sang to the horses. Victoria wrote poems about motherhood, about the fierce protectiveness she felt, about the way William's tiny hand gripped her finger as if she were the center of his universe. The years unfolded with a sweetness Victoria had not dared dream about during those early days under the oak tree. Their ranch prospered modestly but steadily. Henry proved to have a gift for breeding horses, and his animals became known throughout the region for their temperament and stamina. Victoria's writing career continued to grow. She published 2 more books and became a regular contributor to several prominent magazines. William was joined by a daughter, Eleanor, in 1882, and another son, James, in 1885. The house grew with them, Henry adding rooms as the family expanded. The writing room remained Victoria's sanctuary, but now it was not unusual for her to have a child on her lap as she worked, or to incorporate their questions and observations into her poetry. "Mama, why is the sky blue?" Eleanor asked one afternoon. "What do you think?" Victoria responded, always encouraging her children to wonder. "I think it is blue because it is happy. Sad things are gray, but happy things are blue." Victoria wrote that down, weaving her daughter's wisdom into a poem about childhood perspective and the truths that adults forget. Henry had long since mastered reading, and now he read to the children every night, acting out different voices, making them shriek with laughter. But he still asked Victoria to read her poetry to him, still treasured every new piece she created. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry planned a surprise. He arranged for the children to stay with Victoria's father and took her back to Chico, to the oak tree behind the general store where everything had begun. "I have been thinking about that first day," he said as they settled against the trunk, older now but still drawn to each other like magnets. "About how you tried to hide your journal from me. I thought you were just another cowboy passing through. I was just another cowboy passing through. Then I heard your voice, saying those words about the sky, and I knew I had found something rare." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I wrote something for you. It is not good, not like yours, but I wanted to try." Victoria took the paper with trembling hands. Henry had written her a poem, the letters carefully formed, the words simple but achingly sincere. It was about a man who had been drifting until he found a woman who taught him to see beauty, who showed him what home meant. It was about gratitude and love and partnership. "Henry," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks, "this is perfect. I learned from the best." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "You gave me so much, Victoria. Not just your love, but a whole new way of experiencing the world. Before you, I looked at things with my eyes. Now I see them with my heart too. We gave those things to each other." They sat under that tree as the sun set, just as they had so many times before, and Victoria thought about the strange and wonderful path that had led them here. She had been a lonely girl teaching herself to write poetry, and he had been a cowboy looking for supplies. Neither of them could have predicted this life they had built together, this love that had grown from a few shared afternoons into something unshakable. The years continued their steady march. The children grew, each showing different combinations of their parents' traits. William had his father's practicality and his mother's sensitivity. Eleanor was bold and creative, riding horses fearlessly and writing wild stories. James was quieter, thoughtful, always watching and learning. Victoria's father passed peacefully in his sleep in 1888, and they moved him to the ranch for his final months so he could be surrounded by family. On his last day, he squeezed Victoria's hand and whispered, "Your mother was right. You did see the world differently. I am sorry it took me so long to understand that was a gift." They buried him on a hill overlooking the creek, under an oak tree that reminded Victoria of the one in town. She wrote a poem for his service, about fathers and daughters and the complicated love between them, and Henry held her as she cried for the parent who had eventually come to accept her exactly as she was. The 1890s brought changes to Chico and the surrounding area. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and commerce. The town grew, new buildings replacing old ones. But the oak tree behind what had been the general store remained, and sometimes Victoria and Henry would ride into town just to sit beneath it, remembering. You ever regret it?" Henry asked one such afternoon. They were in their 40s now, their faces lined with sun and laughter, their hands bearing the marks of decades of work. "You could have married someone with more education, more culture, someone who understood poetry from the beginning." "I could have," Victoria agreed, "but then I would have missed out on this, on us, on teaching you to love words and having you teach me to see my own worth." She laced her fingers through his. "You asked to hear every word I created, Henry, every single word. Do you know how powerful that was? How much it meant to know that someone cared that deeply about what I had to say? I will never stop wanting to hear your words. Good, because I will never stop writing them." As their children grew into adults, they each found their own paths. William took over the ranch's operations, showing the same dedication his father had. Eleanor moved to San Francisco to pursue art, her letters home filled with descriptions of gallery shows and bohemian circles. James became a teacher, combining his parents' love of words and patient instruction. Victoria published her 5th book of poetry in 1895, a collection that reflected on marriage, motherhood, and the passage of time. Critics praised its honesty and emotional depth. Several poems featured Henry directly, and though he claimed embarrassment at being immortalized in verse, she caught him reading those particular poems over and over when he thought she was not looking. They became grandparents in 1898 when William and his wife had a daughter. Holding the tiny infant, Victoria felt the circle of life completing itself. She wrote poems for her granddaughter, just as she had for her children, weaving words of love and wisdom and hope. Henry surprised her on their 20th anniversary by having the Oak Tree poem, the first one he had ever heard her read, professionally printed and framed. It hung in their bedroom, a reminder of beginnings. "I still remember every word," he told her. "Summer sky like spilled honey." That image has lived in my head for 20 years. The new century arrived with fanfare and speculation about what modern times would bring. Victoria and Henry, now in their 50s, watched the world change around them while maintaining the rituals that had sustained them. Poetry readings on the porch, evening conversations about everything and nothing. Hands held across the dinner table, Victoria's work had taken on new themes in recent years, poems about aging and legacy and the beauty of a love that had weathered decades. A university professor wrote to her, asking permission to include her work in an anthology of Western American poetry. She agreed, pleased that her words might reach new audiences. "You did it," Henry said when she showed him the letter. "You became a real poet, published and recognized." "I was always a real poet, even when I was teaching myself under that tree, even before anyone else heard my words." She smiled at him. "But yes, it is nice to be acknowledged." Their children urged them to slow down, to let others handle the ranch work, but Victoria and Henry were not ready for rocking chairs and idle days. They still rode out to check on cattle, still worked side by side in the garden, still found joy in physical labor and the land they had built their life upon. In 1905, on a golden October afternoon much like the one when they had first met, 27 years earlier, Victoria and Henry rode out to their favorite spot by the creek. The oak trees were changing color, leaves shifting from green to amber, and the air held that particular clarity that came with autumn. They spread a blanket and unpacked the lunch Victoria had prepared. After they ate, Henry lay down with his head in Victoria's lap while she read to him from her latest work, a long poem about the seasons of marriage, about how love changed and deepened over time. "That is your best yet," Henry murmured when she finished. "You have gotten even better over the years." "How is that possible? I have more to write about now, more experience, more depth, more love. She ran her fingers through his hair, gray now at the temples. You have given me a lifetime of material, Henry Yates, and you have given me a lifetime of beauty. Every single day with you has been a gift. They stayed there until sunset, talking about their grandchildren, about William's latest plans for the ranch, about Alina's upcoming visit, about nothing at all. As the sky turned the colors Victoria had spent decades trying to capture in words, Henry sat up and pulled her close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For letting me hear your words. For sharing your gift with me. For choosing this life with me when you could have had anything." "I did have anything. I had everything. I had you." The kiss they shared tasted like decades of other kisses, familiar but still thrilling, still full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "We should head back," Victoria said reluctantly. "It will be full dark soon. One more minute." Henry held her tighter. "I want to remember this moment right here. You in my arms, the creek singing its song, the sky doing that thing you are always trying to describe, perfect peace." They rode home in comfortable silence, the horses knowing the way even in darkness. Inside their house, warm lamplight glowed in the windows, and Victoria felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. She had written thousands of poems over the years, but the greatest creation had been this, a partnership built on respect and passion, and the simple act of listening to each other's truths. That night, before sleep claimed them, Henry asked for his favorite ritual. "Read me something." "Anything you are working on." Victoria reached for the journal she always kept by the bed and read him the newest poem, one she had started that very morning. It was about gratitude, about how the best blessings were often the ones you did not know you were waiting for. "Beautiful," Henry whispered, his eyes already closing. "My talented wife. My remarkable Victoria." She set the journal aside and curled into him, fitting against his body the way she had thousands of times before. Outside, the California night was still and peaceful. Inside, two hearts beat in synchronized rhythm, the cowboy and the poet who had found each other under an oak tree and built a love that would outlast them both. In the years that followed, they continued their dance through life's seasons. There were challenges, of course. Henry developed arthritis in his hands, the same hands that had healed so slowly after that long-ago injury. Victoria's eyesight weakened, requiring glasses for her close work. But they adapted, finding new ways to do the things they loved. When Henry's hands ached too badly to work, Victoria would massage them gently, and he would direct ranch operations with his mind instead of his body. When Victoria struggled to see her own handwriting, Henry became her scribe, carefully writing down the poems she dictated, his penmanship neat and clear. Their grandchildren multiplied, and the house filled regularly with young voices and laughter. Victoria wrote poems for each grandchild on their birthdays, personalized verses that spoke to their unique spirits. Henry built things, cradles, rocking horses, small chairs. Together, they passed on their values of hard work and creativity, of seeing beauty in everyday moments. In 1912, a journalist from San Francisco came to interview Victoria for a feature on Western women writers. The journalist was young and fashionable, clearly expecting to find a quaint old lady with provincial views. Instead, she found a sharp, engaged woman still producing vital work, and a husband who spoke about his wife's talent with undimmed enthusiasm. "What do you consider your greatest accomplishment?" the journalist asked Victoria. She looked at Henry, who was sitting nearby pretending to read but obviously listening. "This," she said simply. "This life. These decades of partnership with a man who valued my words and my dreams. The family we built, the work we both did together and separately. That is my greatest accomplishment." The article, when it appeared, painted a romantic picture of the poet and her cowboy, the unlikely couple who had built an extraordinary life in California's Sacramento Valley. It brought renewed attention to Victoria's work, and she received letters from young women all over the country, thanking her for showing them that they could be both artists and wives, that they did not have to choose between creative expression and domestic happiness. Victoria answered every letter personally, encouraging these young women to find partners who lifted them up rather than holding them back. "Demand to be heard," she wrote. "Demand to be valued for your whole self, not just the parts that are convenient. And when you find someone who asks to hear every word you create, hold on to them." As they moved into their 70s, Victoria and Henry made peace with their mortality in the way that long married couples do, with both sorrow and acceptance. They updated their wills, made sure their children knew where important documents were kept, and had frank conversations about what each wanted when the time came. "I want you to keep writing," Henry told her one evening. "After I am gone, promise me you will not stop." "Henry, do not talk like that. We have to talk like that. I am older than you, and I have worked hard my whole life. My body will give out before yours." He took her hand. "Promise me. Your words are too important to stop just because I am not here to listen anymore." "I will keep writing," she promised, though the thought of doing anything without him seemed impossible. "But you should know that every word I have ever written was made better by having you as my audience. That is not true, but I love that you think so." As it turned out, Victoria was the first to face a serious health crisis. In the winter of 1915, she developed pneumonia. For weeks, she lay fevered and weak while Henry sat vigil at her bedside. Their children took turns coming to help, but it was Henry who never left, who read to her when she was lucid, who held her hand through the worst of it. When she finally turned the corner toward recovery, Henry wept with relief. "I am not ready," he told her. "I will never be ready to lose you." "Good. Because I am not going anywhere yet. We have more sunsets to watch, more poems to write, more life to live." She regained her strength slowly, but by spring she was back at her desk, pen in hand. The experience had given her new material, poems about illness and vulnerability and the fierce love that sustained people through the darkest times. She read them to Henry, who listened with tears in his eyes. "You make even suffering beautiful," he said. "Not beautiful, just true. Suffering is part of life, but so is recovery. So is love. I write about all of it." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919 with a large gathering at the ranch. All three of their children came with their families, grandchildren running everywhere. Friends and neighbors filled the house and spilled onto the grounds. Someone had arranged for a photographer, and there was a wonderful portrait taken of Victoria and Henry standing together on their porch, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling with the contentment of people who knew they had gotten life right. During the party, their grandchildren begged Victoria to read something. She chose a poem she had written specifically for the occasion, about 40 years of waking up next to the same person, of learning to love through all of life's changes. The crowd fell silent as her voice rang out, still strong despite her years. When she finished, there was not a dry eye in the audience. Henry stood and raised his glass. "To my wife, who taught a rough cowboy to see the world through poetry. Who gave me 3 beautiful children and a lifetime of happiness. Who made every single day an adventure. I love you, Victoria, with everything I am." They clinked glasses and kissed while everyone cheered. The 1920s brought new challenges as the world continued to evolve. Cars became common, replacing horses for many purposes. Radio brought voices from far away right into their living room. Their granddaughter Eleanor, named for her aunt, bobbed her hair and wore short skirts, causing much discussion but no real concern. Times changed, but some things remained constant. Victoria published what she suspected might be her final collection in 1923. Titled 40 Years Under Oak Trees, it traced the arc of her life from that first afternoon in Chico to the present. The book opened with the Honey Sky poem and closed with a new piece about growing old with someone who still saw her as beautiful. Critics called it a masterwork, a testament to a life fully lived. Henry's health began to fail in 1925. His heart, the doctor said, was wearing out. There was nothing to be done except to make him comfortable and cherish the time remaining. He faced this news with characteristic pragmatism, more concerned about Victoria than himself. "You will be all right," he told her. "You have the children, the grandchildren. You're writing. I have been loving you for almost 50 years. How am I supposed to simply be all right? You will be all right because you are strong, because you know how to turn pain into beauty, because that is what you do." He coughed, the effort exhausting him. "Write about this. Write about us. Make sure people know what we had. Everyone already knows. I have been writing about us for decades. Then write more. Write until the words run out and then write some more. Promise me." "I promise." On a warm June evening in 1926, almost 47 years to the day after their wedding, Henry Yates died peacefully in his sleep with Victoria beside him. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, and though she had known this moment was coming, the reality of it broke something in her that she knew would never fully heal. The funeral was held on their ranch, and it seemed like everyone in the county attended. Henry had been respected and loved, known for his integrity and kindness. But it was Victoria's eulogy that people would remember, a poem she had written in the days after his death, about a love that transcended mortality, about how the best parts of a person lived on in the hearts of those they touched. The weeks after were the hardest of Victoria's life. The house felt too empty, too quiet. She would catch herself turning to tell Henry something, only to remember he was not there. She would wake in the night reaching for him, finding only empty space. But she had made a promise, and Victoria Garrett Yates had never broken a promise to her husband. So she wrote. She wrote about grief and loss and the gaping wound left by losing your life partner. She wrote about gratitude for the years they had shared. She wrote about the oak tree and the first poem he had asked her to read. She wrote until her hand cramped and her eyes burned, because writing was how she made sense of the world, and losing Henry had turned her world upside down. Her children worried about her, but they also understood that this was how their mother processed pain. They made sure she ate, that she got out of the house occasionally, but they did not try to stop her writing. William found her one afternoon sitting under the oak tree by the creek, journal in her lap, tears running down her face. "Mama," he said gently, settling beside her. "Tell me what you are working on." She read him the poem about how love did not end with death, about how Henry lived on in every word she had ever written, in every sunset that reminded her of his eyes, in every act of kindness that reflected his generous spirit. When she finished, William was crying too. "Papa was right about you," he said. "You do make everything beautiful, even this." As months passed, the sharp edge of grief began to dull into a persistent ache. Victoria would never stop missing Henry, but she learned to carry that loss alongside her memories of joy. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them to see beauty in small things. She continued to write, though her output slowed. On what would have been their 48th anniversary, Victoria returned to Chico. The town had changed dramatically from the place where she had grown up. The general store was long gone, replaced by a modern building. But the oak tree remained larger now, its branches spreading wide. She sat beneath that tree with her ancient journal, opening it to those first poems she had written as a young woman teaching herself craft. The words seemed both foreign and familiar, the handwriting young and uncertain. She thought about the girl she had been, lonely and dreaming, not knowing that the greatest love of her life was about to walk into view. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the wind. "I kept writing, every word just like you asked." She imagined she could hear his voice. "Read it to me." So she did. She read the new poems aloud, there under the tree where it all began, reading to an audience of one who existed now only in her heart and memory. And somehow, in the reading, she felt him close again. Victoria lived 5 more years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1931 at the age of 74. Her final collection of poems, published posthumously, was dedicated simply to Henry, who asked to hear every word. "Here is my last gift to you, my love. Wait for me under the oak trees." She was buried beside Henry on the hill overlooking their creek, both of them resting under the spreading branches of an oak tree, together in death as they had been in life. Their tombstone bore a quote from one of her most famous poems: "Love that listens is love that lasts." Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued to visit the ranch for generations, keeping alive the story of the poet and the cowboy, the unlikely pair who had shown that real love was built on respect, shared dreams, and the simple, profound act of truly hearing another person. And in libraries and bookshops across California and beyond, Victoria's poetry continued to find new readers, young women who discovered in her verses a voice that spoke across decades about the importance of being valued for your whole self, about demanding partnership instead of settling for less, about the transformative power of being asked to share your words with someone who genuinely wanted to hear them. The oak tree in Chico still stands, though few now remember the young woman who once sat beneath it teaching herself poetry, or the cowboy who stopped to listen and changed both their lives forever. But the words remain, preserved in ink and paper, and the memories of those who believe that love built on listening and respect can transcend anything, even time itself.